comes to the October application and even the following year, it's going to have a bit of a repercussion for a few years for work experience for students. Okay. So as Mark said, we're kind of going to switch a little bit from thinking about traditional work experience. It's actually going to be more, it needs to be more of an insight into life as a medical student, life as a doctor, life in the NHS, life within a team of the NHS, what generally life is like, the realities, the negatives, the positives. This insight word is really key. And this isn't actually just within this, scenario that we have. This actually needs to be a key for work experience in general as a role. Insight is what universities want you to have. They want you to actually truly understand what you're getting yourself in for as a career, as a vocation, and as a lifelong job. Whatever you want to go into, even if you want to go into medicine and kind of go on to something after that, as long as you understand what a medical degree is and what you can actually gain from a medical degree, that's the important thing. Do you know how many different specialties of doctors there are? Do you know what a nursing role is, a physician's associate role is, a pharmacist role? Do you have that true insight? Okay. And we're actually going to focus more on the insight because that's what we can gain from where we are at the minute and during this current crisis. So where can you find insight? There's loads and loads of ways you can find insight, and Mark's touched on a few of them already. There's books, we'll come to a good few examples, a good few resources, and we'll talk through how you can gain insight in other ways by thinking outside the box a little. So I will start with volunteering, and I think this is quite important because I think the local aspect is probably something you can get yourselves involved in at the minute. I've seen lots and lots of drives, community drives. On the next slide, we'll show you a good few examples of what you can come across. But there's loads of ways to get involved in your local community. And we've given you a few examples here. Some may be a little bit restricted with this current crisis, like the National Trust. They are starting to scale things back up a little bit as the guidelines are changing from the government. But keep yourself updated with all these websites. They're all really useful to find volunteering roles. So this is just a short list. I know it kind of seems a bit longer, but these are just some of the examples we've come across, even in our own community. I live in the Northeast, and they're really getting involved in the community spirit, and I think it's great. These are just a few things that we found on Facebook. And even if there's something that you think that you can do and contribute and it's not been created yet, then why don't you create it? It shows innovation. It shows that you've seen where people have a need, where vulnerable people need help. That's great. I've talked to a student a couple of weeks ago, and they were doing teaching for children before the COVID crisis. But they've actually switched it to all online, which obviously we're doing right now, but you just have to think outside the box and think about what you can do. But yeah, so as you've highlighted at the bottom, this is probably going to be an interview question. It's a really good topic to come up for interview. So if you can get involved with something, anything, then get yourself involved in something. Even if it's just something about, pick and litter from the park, that's great. Obviously, gloves and masks and keep your social distance, but, there's lots of things you could be doing.
Can I just back to the slides about the volunteering options? I was looking at the one before that, if possible. So the VInspired website is really, really good. You can put in your postcode or kind of your city, and there's literally thousands of opportunities on there. And it doesn't matter that they're not medical at the moment. Obviously, it would be amazing if everybody could have some kind of directly medical healthcare related work experience right now, but it's just not possible.
No.
So we're going to have to use all of these tools to find different opportunities and have different levels of insight, because like you just said then, you know, it's going to be a classic interview question, isn't it? You know, what did you do during COVID-19?
Yeah.
And there are thousands of opportunities just in these websites here. We will send out these slides as well. So with the links to all the websites, you can go and check them all out individually and find something in your area. But there's thousands there. You know, there's no excuse not to get volunteering experience and insight at the moment. There's just thousands of them. But yeah, really good points on the next slide as well. I really like that list.
Yeah. So again, we are going to inundate you with lots of resources. I'm not going to talk through them all because it'll just bore you all. But, you know, everyone's trying to use the technology we have. Like I was explaining earlier, I have a whole degree that's completely online. Everyone's moving towards online learning. You know, BMJ, the British Medical Journal, the Royal Society of Medicine, they're putting on regular webinars, keeping you updated about the COVID crisis, the actual current research that's happening. This is also very useful, and it would be amazingly, just amazing if you could actually get insight into that. And again, for an interview question, if you knew about the research behind COVID-19, that ticks some good boxes. But yeah, even just things like podcasts. I'm a big mainly foodie, but I'm a big love listening to podcasts. But if you can listen to podcasts that are health related and give you an insight onto kind of people's day-to-day lives as well, that, you know, that's great. And I've put the last one, find medical students and junior doctors. You know, I've actually had a couple of questions come through to me via Instagram, and I you know, I'm not opposed to that. There's lots of people, if you know anyone that is related to healthcare, it doesn't have to be medical students and doctors. If you know, if one of your family members is a nurse, for example, talk to them how they're coping at the minute, how it's changed, you know, what's their day-to-day life like, what's their struggles, what's the benefits of their job. If you get an insight into their job, that's what the key is, okay?
I just want to say that Dr. Hope's sick notes is probably my favourite. He's a little bit geeky, which is quite cool. So he goes into some of the kind of the science and biology behind certain cases, and he talks to some of his friends who are like amazing consultants. He'd definitely go and check that one out and subscribe to that guy. He's really, really good.
Just waiting for my slide to load. There we go. So yeah, again, I'll just leave this up for you guys to have a quick look, but GMC, that's a key one. They do a student GMC section as well for like, for aspiring doctors, and they do kind of tomorrow's doctors, which is a kind of a section about learning a little bit about the kind of skills and attributes of them. Have a quick look through. You can get news from that side, student BMJ. There's loads and loads of stuff, and obviously, you know, you can tell loads of companies are changing. We've changed to blogs, articles, webinars. So yeah, you know, loads out there. Books, again, I'll just touch on them. You know, I've been using the Sunshine myself, and I know a lot of my friends have been reading books and things outside, taking advantage of the sun. Read a medical book, read an insight book. You know, you might be reading Harry Potter for the 5th time, like I would be, but actually pick up a medical insight book, and that's really useful. Again, it's something that you can talk about on interview. So, you know, that's really key. So these are some of the good ones, and there's another slide that you'll get as well. So yeah, my favorite I've put at the end is This Is Going to Hurt. So Adam Kay, I think I finished that book in about 24 hours. It was hilarious and actually a really good insight. And Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. Honestly, it is very deep and it's very meaningful, but the thoughts behind it are just incredible. So more kind of traditional work experience. So just to inform you, I've had quite a look at kind of different hospitals. So check your local hospital. Most of them have like a little update section for their work experience update. Some are reviewing whether they're going to open up applications for work experience in kind of June, July time. Some have completely said, no, we're not going to do that until September. Some have said the end of August. So just have a little look. Some are actually accepting applications and kind of like a first come first serve, so quickly have a look and see if you can get an application in, because I'm sure they'll be having lots, so they'll kind of only go through the people that they can get through. But yeah, medical projects have kind of a few other things that they're doing, if Mark wants to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously a lot of our summer courses are either kind of on hold, or we're trying to kind of move students towards the kind of October, February dates. But we are developing some kind of online courses, which a lot of businesses are just having to do. They're having to adapt and create online versions of courses, and we have to do the same. So literally in the space of the last 2 months, we've probably created 2 or 3 different courses that we never would have thought of 6 months ago. So there's a couple of things that the main one that's live at the moment is the digital mentorship program, which pairs students with doctors like Dr. Divany and some of our other amazing mentors. And they basically just mentor you through that entire medical school application process, having one-to-one meetings online like this to go through your specific application, help you with your kind of personal statement, your interviews, all that kind of thing. And then kind of things that aren't online, so our Medic Insight Day, that'll be back from September onwards as well. And then we're currently developing an online medical work experience course, which is crazy because we never would have thought we'd had to create an online version of medical work experience, but that's what we're in the process of doing. Yeah, they are paid courses, but it does allow us to run a lot of free courses and scholarships for students as well. And one of the things on the back of this webinar, actually, that Dr. Divany has kindly helped us out with, we're going to run a free course for 10 students. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a picture and put it on Instagram during this webinar. And then if anybody likes and comments, so if you give us some little bit of feedback on Instagram, obviously you can tell I'm down with Instagram with all my knowledge here. But if you like and comment, so some feedback as a comment on that picture, we'll pick 10 students at random. And then we'll do a completely free clinical skills workshop with Dr. Divany. So it's a bit of social media for us, but then it's a free course for students as well. So I'm actually going to take a picture right now of my kind of setup.
I better smile.
I'll put on Instagram during the Q&A if you want. Cool. Right, I'll upload that whilst the Q&A thing is happening if you want.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think when you kind of said, do you want to do some kind of free competition thing, I was just like, yeah, like might as well. Okay, so we've talked a lot about insight. That's one keyword that we've used a lot, and I'll probably still use it whatever webinar I'm doing. And reflection is the other keyword. You will get sick of it for the next webinar talking about reflection itself, but there's a really good reason why. Reflection actually helps you get good insight. So medical schools, they do really want to see reflection. We will talk about that on the kind of webinar, because it is a broad topic, and most of the questions will probably be, how do I reflect? I'll just touch on the kind of broad points, is that the main points of why you want to reflect is being able to reflect on your own skills, what you already have. What do you already have that would make you a great doctor? Reflect on any skills that you want to improve on, and use work experience use your insight to understand how you can improve those skills. The reflection itself will really serve you well for interview and personal statements. It's the reflection aspect of it that the medical school actually want you to see. So if you see kind of, you know, if you gain insight and then reflect on it, that's the important thing. That would really stand you out. So we're actually come to the end. We know you guys mostly have questions. We normally keep it to only about 25-30 minutes of talking. So I'd just like to summarize. So we've got our reflection. That's one of our big keys. Insight is our other big key. As we said, we'll give another webinar on reflection. My other big take-home point, so work experience does not have to be in a hospital. There's lots of ways that people get care from other people. There's lots of vulnerable people, children, animals, anyone that needs, you know, someone's help, especially in a time like this. Work experience does not always have to be with a doctor, okay? So there is lots of other members of a hospital. Can you get work experience, or can you gain insight from any other healthcare professional as well? That'd be great. Reflect and spend time thinking about your own skills and attributes, how you can develop them, and then what skills you have that would make you a great doctor. Think outside the box, as we've tried to come and trying to give you a little bit of an idea how you can kind of gain insight from books, blogs, webinars, podcasts, and again, all this volunteering in the local community, volunteering on looking at those websites as well. Please keep up to date. As we've kind of highlighted already, this would be a great question that had come up on an interview. So there's lots of interview questions it could be. It could be, what have you learned about your time during the COVID crisis? If you were in charge of the NHS, what would you change about the guidance? If you were in charge of the government, what would you change? So if you compare what the guidance was in December when all the first cases started to come out from Wuhan, and compare it to what it is now, and then compare it to what it's going to be like in the future, there's going to be lots and lots of changes. And if you keep up to date, and not just social media up to date, because there's lots of stuff that's false out there, and lots of stuff that you can gain from actually looking at the websites that we've given you, you know, that'd really put you ahead of the rest. And lastly, remember to be positive. Everyone, I think, is thinking a little bit less positive about their time in the lockdown. But I don't know about you, I'm still talking and getting all the gossip from my friends and family, all via video. I don't know whether you've seen all the jellyfish. I think there was only one photo of the jellyfish in Venice. But loads of carbon emissions are being reduced. There's loads and loads of stuff that's come out positive. And, you know, if you can stay positive out of all of this, then that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good point to look at the positives, and just keep looking forward with your applications. You know, you're not going to be able to get that hospital traditional work experience right now, but we've literally given you hundreds and hundreds of different options that we can't go through them all in a webinar like this, because we want to make sure that we've got time for question and answers at the end. But we tried to list as many as possible. We'll send you all the slides, so you've got all the links to go away and have a look and do some research. And then if you pair all of that, kind of all those opportunities, and then you jump onto the next webinar and we talk about reflection on how to use it, and how to use it in things like the personal statement, how to use it when it comes to interviews. That's when it's all going to come together, because you're going to have all this kind of insight that you've gained, and then you're going to learn how to use it to maximize your medical school application. And those two things together are what make amazing applicants. So yeah, go away and have a look at that. But right now, let's have some live questions. I think the upvote system isn't working, so they're just coming through as individual questions. But I'll try and pick out any common questions and then throw them to you, if that's okay, Dr. Devaney.
Yeah, sure. I'll just take a sip of water.
I'll just have a quick look for a couple of questions. Right. Okay. Can I do work experience for medicine, even if I'm not sure if medicine is for me?
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely you could. I think even if you're thinking of, even if you do medical work experience and then think, actually, it's not for me, I'm sure by using insight into yourself and actually reflecting on those skills, maybe those skills that you have aren't suited to medicine, and maybe that's why you don't want to do it. In a good way, maybe if you don't want to do medicine, what is it that you want to do, and can you use that experience for something else? Like maybe actually I'm still going to keep it in healthcare, but maybe being a pharmacist is actually what's more suited to you. You still can, because everyone in a hospital, there's so many jobs in a hospital, it's unreal that even if you have, say for example, hospital experience with a doctor interacts with so many people and so many specialties, that even if you're using it, for example, for pharmacy, they'd be interacting with pharmacists. If I'm on a ward, you're literally sat next to the ward pharmacist and going through things, and they give you advice, you give them advice, and you work together as a team. So yeah, of course you could. You use that kind of reflection about what's important, and then you can use it for a personal statement for something else, but you just have to use it in the right way.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I'm just gonna. Normally they're kind of bunched into the most popular questions with the upvote, but that's not working at the moment. So it might take me a little bit longer to find some questions. Is it required to have work experience in a healthcare setting, e.g. care homes?
So different universities, and it will be different, obviously, during this time. I'm sure in September time, some universities will be coming out with new kind of not guidance in a way, but things that they like. Each university, especially going through UCAS, you can see if there's certain unis that specifically want you to have a certain type of work experience. So there's one that want you to have done a particular course, and there's one that wants you to have had a care role, which can include working in a care home. But if it's a care role, there's different ways to have a care role. Like I was a play worker in a school, and that was my care role. I was looking after children. So you just have to look at each universities. If there's a particular university that you're looking for, then maybe do that. But yeah, not specifically.
Right, okay, let's have a look. How soon after lockdown measures are relaxed, do you think the hospitals will open up to students and work experience again? Do you have any kind of insight or knowledge about that being kind of in the hospital?
I think it's quite a hard question, because the current guidance is all dependent on how things go over the next few weeks. So all the dates and everything that the government have released, they are all dependent. So if everything goes well, they're saying the schools will reopen on June the 1st. If everything goes well, then, shops and things will start to open in July. So it's hard to say a particular time frame. Possibly a couple of weeks, possibly a few months. I don't think it would be any longer than that when lockdowns lifted. The only thing that I'd be is that they'd probably put extra restrictions in place, and maybe less volunteers, maybe having the volunteers wearing masks or something like that. I think once lockdowns are lifted, I think they'd need some time to make sure everyone was safe.
Okay, I'll try and find another one. In an application, how much weight do medical schools place on work experience? I guess that would vary, wouldn't it, really?
Yeah, it would. You're right. Again, it's similar to the first question, and there's not actually a definitive answer. The more the better, I suppose. But it's actually more about quality over quantity. So if you have, a year of work experience and have really learned from it, gained really good insight, really reflected on it and understood how it changed you as a person, but it was actually only one work experience technically, then actually that's amazing. But if you only have like a week of shadowing, didn't really learn or didn't really see anything, didn't ask questions, that's probably not great. So I think to be safe, to have a good quality work experience, to get good insight in it. But again, it depends on each university. Some have a minimum requirement of like 1 or 2 weeks. Some have a requirement of needing a volunteer role. So yeah, it does depend.
Yeah, we definitely see, because we obviously interview hundreds of students each year, and we see a very big difference between students that have a list of just tons and tons of different work experience, but they don't know how to reflect on it. And then you'll have one student that has 1, maybe 2 bits of work experience or volunteering that they've done, but they've really, really understood and learned something from it and taken things from it and can communicate that in the personal statements and interviews. And as a medical applicant, it's really clear. You go for that one that can reflect and can use their experience really, really well, compared to somebody who just lists off, 10 hospitals or 10 doctors that they've followed.
Yeah. The medical school, the kind of applications kind of staff, they don't, honestly, they don't really care who you've shadowed, when you've shadowed them, or what hospital you've shadowed them in. They don't care the fancy procedure that you've seen. What did you learn from that fancy procedure? What did you learn about that particular hospital? Have you spent time in a rural hospital, in a city hospital, in a trauma hospital? How did they differ? What's the learning points behind that? Did you shadow a nurse one day, a doctor the next day? How did their day-to-day lives differ? That's what they want. That's the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, definitely. Somebody asked a question. So somebody is currently a lifeguard. Would that count as work experience for medicine?
So for every type of work experience, what I'll say is that if you've learned something about yourself, if you learn about, I'm sure you would have done BLS. So if you've learned about the risks that there's been, have you looked after someone that's vulnerable in a situation? What have you learned from that? Do you work in a team? Have you got someone else that you need to communicate with? Have you taken on a leadership role in that? I think that's the bit that's important. So if you can display that, then yeah, of course, that's a great work experience.
Yeah, definitely. It comes back to knowing how to use it again and drawing out those skills. Even if it's, there was an incident and you had to spend some time with one of the parents who was really upset.
Yeah.
If you can take something out of a scenario like that and you can draw out and reflect on it, then that is absolute gold.
Absolutely.
I think that's a fantastic kind of part-time job or volunteering thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question about your experience here, in your kind of work experience. What do you think was your best work experience or insight moment that you had when you were applying to medical school?
So I suppose this is a longer answer than maybe they expect, but I actually didn't get into university the first time, and it actually, I think, was down to my work experience. I was that student that only had the 1 week here, 1 week here, 1 week here, purely shadowing in a hospital. I was very lucky that I had family, friends who I could go and shadow. I had no idea how to reflect on it. I just named what I seen. I just kind of put, oh, I spent a day with the midwives and seen this. That's not what the universities are looking for. So I actually didn't get in first time round. I got in second time round, because I mentioned before that I was a play worker. I was a play worker for a whole year. It was part-time, so I only actually worked 4 hours every day. But I was a play worker Monday to Friday. That was what I did in my gap year. I learned so much about that. Communication and leadership from that side of things was my key. Also, the other thing that I did was a volunteering job. It was once every 2 Sundays. So it was only 2 Sunday mornings every month. So it wasn't a great deal of commitment. I was a receptionist in a hospice. So I answered the phones, I made cups of teas and coffees, and I learned so much from that job as well. It was a hospice for, whether you guys know, so it's for end of life. I seen people and families in their most vulnerable moments and was able to talk about this and what I learned about this and how it reflects to being a doctor, because we had GPs come in occasionally to help with kind of palliative medicines. I think those two was why I made it second year.
Excellent. That's really good to hear that. So a student has asked, how much time each day would you advise I spend watching the news, listening to podcasts, reading medical articles and things like that?
Yeah, that is a good question, because we have given you a lot of resources, and you probably can get sucked in quite easily. You know, don't be lazy about it, but you don't have to be kind of sucked in every evening, every hour of the day. If you keep on top of, so I have the BBC News app on my phone, and I actually just look at the news just when I wake up in the morning for 5 minutes, just get a little bit of an update, get a little bit of an international update as well, see what the other countries are doing coming out of their lockdowns. And that's it, 5 minutes. And I'm up to date. Podcasts and things, obviously it depends how long the podcast is. The webinars, how long it depends. You still have to have a little bit of a life as well. That's really important. So maybe if you can, one thing a day. So, if you really want to, that's the most I'd say, because you still want to have time with your family. You still have your own schoolwork to be doing. If you do have a nice book and really get stuck into it, I'm not going to, you don't have to stop reading your book, obviously. Adam Kay's book, that's it. But yeah, just be sensible. If you're getting overwhelmed, then stop, have a break. Please don't stress yourself out. It's a stressful time enough for people. But yeah, just be sensible.
Okay, so we've got a question here about, does having volunteering at a charity shop, is that weighted differently compared to work experience in a care home?
Again, it is a very similar answer to what I've given. But again, both, if you have one student that worked in a care home and one student that worked in a charity shop, it depends what their day-to-day role was and what they've learned. What have you got out of the job? If you worked in a charity shop and you thought it was really, really boring, learnt nothing, and just wanted to leave by the end of the day, just stood by the till and did nothing, then have you learnt something? But if you worked in a charity shop, you got involved with the community, you were helping doing pickups, you were helping to do drop-offs, you were running a little charity drive, you were helping to create something, you were working with, you might have seen someone vulnerable that came into the shop that needed a bit of help. Did you reach out to them? Reflect on that scenario. Then it doesn't actually matter whether someone's been in a care home and you've been in a charity shop. If you've been able to reflect on it a really good way, then that's what the key is.
Yeah, I think that there's a pattern to these answers, and that's why it's so important that the next webinar about the reflection is so critical, that it's not about what you do, it's about what you learn from it and how you apply that. So everybody or students quite often ask, I need to shadow a GP, or I need to get into a hospital. It's not about that. And that's what we'll kind of cover in the next webinar as well. And hopefully that kind of comes across to the students as well, that it's about how you use all those experiences. We've given you hundreds and hundreds of different opportunities in the slides above and volunteering options, but you have to be able to go out there and make the most of them. That's the difference between, a normal medical applicant and an amazing one that's definitely going to stand out.
I think as well, just to kind of extend that, I know I was saying that there's a lot of different universities that sometimes have different work experience requirements. Before all of this kind of lockdown, one of the key ones that I would kind of mention is that having a care role is quite a common thing that comes up for medical schools. So having a care role in some way with someone vulnerable in nature is quite highly sought after. I think that's why I got my hospice job, because that's that care role.
Yeah, that is, if you can get that kind of experience, that is the ultimate gold standard. Obviously times are a little bit different at the moment, and you might not have access to those same opportunities.
No.
But that first slide where we said everybody's in the same boat, nobody else is going to be an advantage over you because you've not gained that experience. And medical schools are going to be very aware when it comes to the application selections that people aren't going to have had the same opportunities they might have had a year ago, 2 years ago. So if you don't have that level or that kind of perfect idea of work experience in a care home or in a hospital, don't worry. Don't panic at all. It's not the end of the world. Everybody's in the same boat, and there are different opportunities now, and you still can make the most of those opportunities and reflect on those in different ways.
Yeah, you can still gain an element of a care role from the local community ones that we are pointing out. So, definitely have a look at those.
Yeah, I think the idea of that local community care home or care role, and it was listed on there, just go and make a cup of tea for a neighbour, have a conversation with them, just ask if they're okay. That's gold in itself. And to have that level of communication and care and passion to go out there and speak to elderly neighbours that might need a bit of help, that's what medical schools are looking for as well. It doesn't have to be complicated. Right, okay, I'll find a couple more questions because we're about 45 minutes in now. We've got 662 questions, so I don't think we'll get through them all in the next 5 minutes.
Maybe not. Is there an opportunity for... Sorry, Mark, is there an opportunity for them... is there an opportunity for the students to ask questions someplace else?
Potentially. If we email them all in, we might have an absolute massive stack. Is there any way that you'd kind of prefer to answer any more questions if there's any more?
I suppose. Would you
prefer an email?
I think I don't mind if they're very short questions for if they're commenting on that kind of, like we said, sharing the commenting on the Instagram post. Email is a good option. But then I know there's a survey that goes out, I believe. They can maybe post a question on that and see if there's any ones that we can help out and answer, then we can try. We probably won't be able to answer all 606 questions, but...
Well, we'll do a bit of a mix then. So if anybody does post any questions on the same Instagram post, then great, we might be able to answer a few on there. And if anybody leaves any questions as part of the post-webinar survey, then we'll gather a few from there and answer a few from there as well. It obviously just shows, how concerned students are about work experience. So maybe we'll take a few more, and we'll try and hang on for maybe 5-10 minutes. and then we'll pass it over to kind of Instagram and the survey for questions if you want.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's find a couple more then. We'll try and do these quickly. What age/school year is best to get work experience?
It's getting harder and harder the younger you are. Kind of under 16s, it's getting very hard. I'm sure you guys have come across that under 18 is even hard. Don't overburden yourself. I think, maybe think of it, the GCSEs, that kind of levels. Maybe not year 10. If you're super keen, you can kind of think about, earlier the better, great. But you need to make sure if you are getting work experience, especially over a few years, keep a diary, because you're going to forget what you've learned, and what you've seen when it comes to interviews, when it comes to writing your personal statement. So whatever year you're in, if you decide to get work experience, great. If you've learned something, write it down in a diary, so then when you come back, you can be like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, I remember what I learned that day. Write as much as you can down, and then that'd be great.
I think this is quite a good question, actually. How can you prove you have read/listened to or read the books and articles if you get asked to interview?
Oh, okay. This is a great question, because this is what I messed up in one of my interviews. So I was in my Bristol interview. Bristol is a panel interview. And well, when I did it, 10 million years ago. So for Bristol, I said, and I did, this was not a lie, I did read an article about a new surgical technique that had come out. It was really interesting. That's why I read it. But I didn't quite fully understand it. So they asked me about it in an interview, because it was in my personal statement. I was just like, oh yeah, that's great. Ask away. But yeah, I didn't understand it. So when they asked me something specific about it, they'd obviously read it as well. So I was just like, oh no. And then I got really nervous and didn't know what to say. So then, you can really tell the people that have read it. So if you're going to read it, really understand it, really reflect on it, and actually make sure you can talk about it. Because if they're going to ask you an interview, you need to be talking to them. You need to be kind of getting them engaged, be like, oh, do you know, it's a great book. I learned this. Do you know what made me completely convinced I want to be a doctor? I thought that's a great career. You need to be able to talk like that.
Yeah, if you can't hold the conversation with a family member or a friend about whatever you've listened to or read, then probably don't put it in your personal statement or bring it up at interviews, because they will ask you questions about it and you don't want to trip up.
Safe to say I did not get into Bristol.
Right, okay, let's find a couple more quickly. Would work experience in a pharmacy be suitable for medicine?
Yeah, again, I'm gonna kind of repeat myself a little bit, but if you've learned enough about it, if the day-to-day role is what you've learned, because in a pharmacy, so if you're in a community pharmacy, you're going to be getting GP prescriptions coming in from there. You'll be able to talk through the prescriptions with the pharmacist, with the pharmacy tech, be able to be like, oh, what's this? What does that mean? And be like, oh, okay, I understand that now. I understand, what a Dosset box is. I know what a repeat prescription is, and I know what this is and how it works. There will be patients that come into the pharmacy. So, is that a chance? If you can get a volunteer job or a job in a pharmacy at the minute, obviously socially distanced, but can you talk to that patient? Can you ask them, do you mind me asking you a few questions about why you've come in today? Pharmacies sometimes have like a confidential kind of room after it, behind it. So if it's not busy, maybe you can just kind of chat with the patient and chat with the pharmacist about their scenario. There's loads to learn in a pharmacy.
Okay, we'll try and find a couple more really quickly. can I talk about care roles I did in year 10, or would it be better to have something that's a bit more relevant? Time relevant, I mean.
Like, yeah, time relevant. Again, like if you're in year 12 and this is kind of 2 years ago, can you remember what you learned? Like, did you kind of, I wouldn't have, I don't have memory what I did last week, let alone 2 years ago. So if you can remember it okay, if you can discuss it okay, and put on kind of skills that you learned from into your personal statement, then great. But do make sure that you, like Mark said, with anything, make sure that you can have a conversation about it. So if they do ask you about it in an interview, are you able to talk about it 2 years later? If you can, great, put it in.
Okay, maybe one final question. How we're doing for the time? We're coming up to about 55 minutes, which is just before an hour. So we'll do one more question. Let's see if we can find a good one. I think this is quite a nice question. If you've done a few years of continuous work experience in one place, non-medical related, could you talk about how that changed or helped develop you?
Oh, absolutely. If you can put in what you have gained as a person, and if those gains make you a better potential doctor, then that's amazing. So if you can say, I'm just going to throw out an example here, but if you can say that you worked, we've mentioned it a few times, but worked in a care home every weekend just for the morning for like 3 years. If you can say that how it's changed you as a person over those 3 years, how you've gained more empathy, that you've been able to communicate with all different types of people in that care home, from staff, from healthcare professionals, from family members to the people themselves in the home, that's great. Were you able to use a particular skill there? You know, can you cut hair? Were you able to talk to the people in the care home while cutting their hair? You know, great. Yeah, 100% do that.
I think that's a really, really nice question to end on there. Please leave us some feedback on the Instagram post, like and comment on there, and then you'll be in with a chance to, we'll pick 10 students at random and we'll do a free course for those students. Please leave us some feedback on the webinar survey as well, because that means that we can create better webinars for you. And we will be running a webinar around reflection soon. So hopefully you'll go away and read all those articles and get some volunteering experience, and then we'll go through how to use it in personal statements and interviews as well. We will send the slides out as well in the next kind of 48 hours. So thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again on the next few webinars. Thank you very much.